Welcome to Vagabond Voices.
This is Nat.
And this is Sam.
And we'll be taking you with us as we meander our way south from Mexico to Argentina.
From cities to towns and beaches to mountains, we explore it all, discovering the charms and quirks of each little corner we pass on our way south.
You'll be hearing from people we meet along the way, whether they're fellow travelers or locals who are from the area we're passing through.
Our aim is to bring a little taste of what we're experiencing on the road to you by the way of sound, chatting with the people we meet about life here and what inspires them.
We believe voice is one of the most intimate ways to record this trip, and we hope it can be a fun way for you to keep up with our travels wherever they take us.
And most of all, that it inspires you in some way.
I worked as an archaeologist here in the 60s and 70s, and I did field work, which is not like Indiana Jones. It's hard, hot, more often than not, especially in the Yucatan, dirty work. And archaeology's dirty in more ways than one. You know, there's a lot of corruption and grave robbers, looters, bribery. I mean, and this is even 50 years ago, but things still continue. But so I knew Mexico from being out in the wilds, the jungles, everything. And I also knew Mexico City, and I loved it. I really loved it. And I did that for many years. And I worked at the Los Angeles County Museum, but I was always like wanting to go back.
There's been so many seasons, like so many phases of my experience here. Like I really see it as like some, like where like I can recognize like time frames, almost like television seasons or something like that. You know, where it's like, and even times where it's like it's almost like, oh yo, this is season finale right here. Like,
oh, no.
Like recognizing that, like, and it's like okay, like there's the closings and there's the new openings and stuff, and like, and that includes obviously like me leaving and coming back and stuff too. Like I'll go away for a few weeks or a month or so, But yeah, it's been quite a range of experiences, and something that has been quite new to me too is like living in a town, like a small town like this. Like I grew up in cities, and I did live in a few smaller towns, but not this small, and not like I didn't commit to staying in a town this small for as long as I have. You know, like there were a few times where I lived in little villages for like 4 or 5 months or something in the mountains, but like as far as like something that this place has really exposed me to is like accountability and honesty that came up for me, like, you know, in quite difficult situations, but I realized like how much this is an opportunity for me to work on these things.
Well, she knew how young we were and that here we were going to be so far away from everybody. We really knew no one out here. There was nobody that we knew.
Wow.
I'm sure she was frightened, and nervous, anxious.
Yeah.
But
You know, the year before I came out here, I remember filing my income tax. You know how much money I made that year?
$3,000.
$6,000.
$6,000.
All year.
The first year I was out here, I made over $15,000. I thought this was the land of milk and honey.
I guess at my lowest point was around New Year's Eve, 94, 95. Not really knowing what I wanted to do. Didn't have a direction, didn't have any kind of, didn't feel like I wanted to go back and pick up the threads and go back to school. Knew I didn't want to be in Windsor and be in the machine shop and didn't want to go out and be social on New Year's Eve. And I went to the park with a bottle of beer and a joint and sat in the park thinking about how miserable my situation was. And then it began to snow.
Oh no,
Wow.
to make matters worse.
Oh yeah, I was just like, oh fuck. And I thought, where's the happiness? Where is my happiness? Where is it? And I started thinking about San Pablo.
Guatemala.
This was the last place, that I had the joie de vivre, the joy of life, and my time was more or less my own, even though I was living off savings. But, I could not necessarily grow onions, but I could grow. So, that kind of, and I figured it out. I figured, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I was paying off my debt and putting money together to go and be with somebody. And our plan was to drive from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego.
Oh,
That
wow.
was the plan for the
Yeah.
future with that woman. And I was beginning to make a head of steam, I guess. End of December, I pretty well paid off the debt and began saving. Worked 2 jobs again, worked in my friend's restaurant, bartended, worked in the machine shop, just put a whack of money together, bought a vehicle, and by December of 1995, my buddy Derek Sharofsky and myself, I packed up it was a Mazda B2200 this time. I picked up a couple of tools. Murray traded me my microwave. That was one thing that I salvaged from my apartment. My mom had bought me a microwave when I moved out, and he kept the microwave.
Oh wow.
I got his old table saw and chop saw and a belt sander. And I drove back to Guatemala with the idea of building a house, buying some land and building a house.
I had an experience there working for an entire year. It was a 12-month contract. Was my first time out of the capital city of Honduras, where I grew up, and a turning point in my life. I discovered that I had a very special connection to nature. I discovered that I had a very special connection to the colors of nature, to being in an area that was not loud, noisy, but that brought a calm to my life. A city, of course, is filled with ambulance sounds and people moving very fast On this fishing island, it was the total opposite. And I realized that I liked that lifestyle, and I decided to make not a true career change, but a change in perspective in life. And then I pursue additional schooling to find that niche that will provide me a lot of time for my family, a lot of time for myself, without having to be in a rush life situation.
Through my last job, I bounced 3 different jobs, and my second job was working on storm sewers, which is a very not fun sector of environmental engineering. But it was through that where my old professor, Kyle, he was doing research in Uruguay, and this now connects to that trip. He had a camera to study sediment flocculation in the Rio de la Plata that separates Uruguay from Argentina. And so he's like, I need a research assistant, can you come with? I went from there. And then, long story short, I ended up finding out about a water quality group in Guatemala shortly after, and I went to Guatemala for that. And so a lot of my trips started to now tie in engineering, where I'm like, oh, I can be like a contractor almost and help these groups around the world, a lot in Latin America, while still having my job. And my old job, my boss told me, he wasn't happy with it, but I didn't care. Right? I'm like, I'm helping. He's like, good engineers don't travel though. And I'm like, no, great engineers travel.
It was funny because before I was always scared of this point because I had a certain number in my head, and I always told myself if I reach that number, I'm going to stop traveling and I'm going to go back home and get a job again or whatever. And I reached that number, and it was like, oh, okay, that's the number.
What did you feel like when you reached it? What was...
That is the funny thing. I always thought it would make me anxious, and that's why I had this exit plan of going back to work or going back home or whatever. And I didn't feel anxious at all. I was like, okay. So I actually, I couldn't work at my job anymore. They let go of a lot of people in that period, and they also let go of me.
Oh, so was this a previous job?
Yeah, that was a previous job. That was actually a job that offered me the remote work in the first place.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I actually I met my lowest number. I lost my job, and I was so not scared, which was surprising to me because I was always scared of this moment, and then it happened, and I was like, I remember I had a call with my boss, and they told me that due to several changes in the company, they had to let go of a lot of people, blah blah blah. And I was I wasn't scared. I was just like, okay. And then I hung up, and I was sitting in this cafe. It was in Peru, I think. And I was like, okay, now I have to figure out something else. And the thought of going back home didn't even occur to me in that moment. It was just like, okay, now I have to figure something out. And that ability of not being scared, of not having money anymore, and that there's always a way to figure it out, even on the road, was something so comforting to me.